The war in Ukraine has opened a new front, confirmed not by tanks, but by smoke rising from deep within Russia. On October 23rd, this signals a critical strategic pivot. Ukrainian forces are no longer focused solely on battlefield attrition. They are now targeting the economic engine funding the Russian military. This highly effective campaign has already contributed to $69 billion in losses and is actively breaking Moscow's war machine. At approximately 3:15 a.m., Ukrainian kamikaze drones, which are operating with increasing range and precision, struck the Kuibyshev oil refinery, located in the Samara region. Russian authorities later confirmed this strike, reporting a significant fire at one of the primary processing units. This single event, which halted a major facility, is not an isolated incident. Instead, it represents the latest strike in a methodical and escalating campaign of economic warfare, one designed to cripple Russia's ability to finance its war effort. The results of this strategy are now becoming evident domestically inside Russia. This week, the Russian government announced an extension of its temporary ban on gasoline exports, which will now run until the last of October 2025. This move is an attempt to stabilize the domestic market. Despite this measure, petroleum prices have reached record highs, and multiple regions are reporting significant gasoline shortages. This analysis will detail Ukraine's strategic shift toward economic attrition. It will examine the vulnerabilities of the Russian energy sector, the cascading effects on Russia's military and civilian population, and the attempts by Moscow to counter this ongoing campaign. As the war grinds toward its fifth year, Ukrainian military planners have visibly committed to an asymmetrical strategy. Recognizing the difficulty of matching Russia's quantitative advantages in both manpower and materiel, Kyiv has shifted its focus to Russia's most critical vulnerability, its energy economy. The objective is no longer solely to defeat Russian forces on the battlefield. It is now to degrade the financial and logistical foundations that sustain them. The new targets are fuel depots, crude oil refineries, and vital energy export hubs. The assessed goal is to bleed the Kremlin of the revenue required to maintain its war machine. To understand this strategy, one must first grasp the structure of the Russian state budget. Energy is not merely an important sector, it is the central pillar of the nation's finances. In recent years, oil and gas revenues have accounted for anywhere from 30% to 50% of the entire federal budget. This massive revenue stream directly funds military expenditures, soldier salaries, domestic propaganda campaigns, and the extensive public subsidies that ensure domestic stability. By 2025, however, this foundation is showing significant cracks. In the first 7 months of the year, Russian oil and gas revenues reportedly dropped by 19%. This represents a staggering loss of 5.52 trillion rubles, or approximately $69 billion US. When this money dries up, the military's logistical capacity slows. Public services are cut, and the Kremlin's carefully constructed illusion of domestic normalcy begins to wobble. Historically, Moscow has wielded its energy infrastructure as a geopolitical weapon. Russia's global influence was built on pipelines, not just treaties. When Ukraine demonstrated political independence in 2006 and 2009, Moscow responded by cutting off gas supplies, effectively punishing the civilian population. European nations, including Germany, Hungary, and Slovakia, were frequently caught in this web. They were forced into compliance by the knowledge that Russia could turn a single valve and send energy prices soaring. Ukraine is now systematically turning that playbook inside out. By targeting the physical energy infrastructure, Kyiv is dismantling the very tools Russia used for intimidation. This is not simple retaliation. It is a calculated strategy to expose the soft underbelly of an empire built on fossil fuel dominance. This strategic pivot was born from necessity. Ukraine's own energy system has faced relentless Russian attacks since the 2022 full-scale invasion, with strikes intensifying in the spring of 2024. By the end of 2023, roughly half of Ukraine's power generation capacity was either occupied, destroyed, or severely damaged. The Russian seizure of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant alone removed 6 gigawatts from the grid. Between March and May of 2024, another 9 gigawatts of capacity were lost, primarily from thermal and hydroelectric plants. By the summer of 2024, Ukraine was operating on just 1/3 of its pre-war capacity, plunging cities into darkness. In response, Ukraine adapted. It began began targeting the arteries of Russia's war machine, its refineries. In 2025, this tactic has evolved into a full-scale campaign. Reports suggest that approximately 17% of Russia's total refining capacity, about 1.1 million barrels per day, has been knocked offline by Ukrainian strikes. August 2025 has been a particular turning point. At 2:40 a.m. on August 12, a coordinated drone strike struck the Krasnodar refinery in southern Russia, and the resulting fire led to an immediate and total halt of operations. At 3:15 a.m. on August 17th, as previously mentioned, the Caesar refinery in Samara was hit, its blaze visible for miles. Subsequently, at 4 a.m. on August 21st, the Kubashev plant, also in Samara, suffered similar damage, resulting in assessed losses of hundreds of millions of dollars in a single night. These operations have disabled core facilities. The Ryazan refinery, for example, which was successfully disabled earlier in the campaign, handles nearly 5% of Russia's total output. Its disruption caused immediate supply chain buckling and panic. Crucially, these strikes are not limited to the border. Ukraine has demonstrated deep strike capability, hitting targets in Volgograd, Nizhny Novgorod, and Novoshakhtinsk, cities once considered safe from attack. In total, Ukraine is assessed to have launched more than 60 attacks on over 24 refineries. Russia's vast geography, once a strategic asset, has become a liability. The effects of this campaign are multifaceted, impacting Russia's industrial, environmental, civilian, and military sectors. Regarding the industrial and environmental strain, damaged refineries are not easily repaired. These are complex facilities that process millions of tons of oil, and fires often take days to control, with repairs stretching into months. While these facilities sit idle, Russia is forced to export more raw crude oil instead of refined products like gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. This shift cuts deep into profits, as crude oil sells for significantly less, shrinking profit margins. Furthermore, the environmental damage is severe. Massive fires in Samara and Krasnodar have spewed thick, black smoke containing pollutants like sulfur dioxide over towns and farmland. Local reports indicate small spills have contaminated local water sources. The cost of this environmental cleanup, running into the millions, diverts further resources from the war effort. This strategy is now directly impacting Russian domestic life, creating a squeeze on both civilians and the military. Fuel shortages are rampant, with gas stations running dry in regions from occupied Crimea to the Russian Far East. Drivers face multi-hour lines, rationing, or find pumps completely empty. This has led to sector paralysis. The shortages are biting farmers who cannot run tractors for harvesting, and truckers who are stranded with half-loaded rigs. This, in turn, jams the entire domestic supply chain for food and materials. Consequently, inflation is climbing. With fuel scarce, prices are rising sharply, and some regions report a 50% spike since the start of the year. This fuel inflation is translating directly into higher costs for groceries, transportation, and all consumer goods. The Russian military is also feeling the squeeze. Tanks, trucks, and jets are all fuel dependent. In August, several reports suggested fuel constraints delayed Russian offensive operations in the Donbass. Some air bases have been forced to ration jet fuel, cutting back on sorties and cancelling training exercises. In a significant strategic reversal, Russia has been forced to import fuel from allies like Belarus and Kazakhstan to stabilize its frontline logistics, a development unheard of for a nation that built its modern identity on energy independence. Moscow is not remaining static in the face of these attacks. Its response has been twofold: retaliation and defense. As retaliation, Russia has escalated its own attacks on Ukraine's energy grid. This past August, Russian forces launched a massive barrage of over 500 drones and 45 missiles in a single night, attempting to inflict reciprocal pain on Ukraine's infrastructure. In terms of defense, Moscow is pouring resources into protecting its hundreds of energy sites. Advanced air defense systems, including S-400 batteries, are being redeployed from the front line to guard refineries. However, this presents a logistical nightmare. Spreading these expensive assets thin makes them vulnerable, and the small, nimble, low-flying drones used by Ukraine remain difficult to intercept. Economically, Russia is adapting by pivoting its export strategy, shipping more crude oil and rerouting some supplies through smaller, less damaged ports like Luga. These are, however, assessed as band-aid fixes that do not solve the core problem of destroyed refining capacity. Domestically, the Kremlin is in damage control, waging an information war as a black market flourishes. State media downplays shortages as seasonal or blames Western sanctions. Yet, social media posts from cities like Rostov, which show long lines and empty pumps, directly contradict the official narrative. This growing gap between state propaganda and lived reality is eroding public trust. This pressure has also fueled a burgeoning black market. To bypass sanctions and physical damage, a shadow fleet of tankers operates without trackers, using falsified documents to move Russian fuel. While this provides cash flow to buyers like India, China, and Turkey, often at discounts, reported up to 20%, it is corrosive to the Russian state. This black market leads to widespread tax evasion, as off-book sales mean no tax revenue. This starves regional governments of funds for schools, hospitals, and pensions, which has fueled small-scale protests in regions like Siberia and Tatarstan. It also drives up domestic inflation, as fuel is sold under the table at double or triple the cost, and it erodes public faith in the state's ability to provide basic goods. In the long term, it discourages investment in the legal energy sector, making it weaker over time. Ukraine's strategy is reshaping the war, turning it from a battlefield contest into an economic slugfest. It is forcing Moscow into a slow, crippling struggle. The economic data is stark. In July, Russian oil and gas taxes fell 27% year over year. Defense spending is estimated at an unsustainable 8% of GDP. The Russian ruble, propped up by energy sales, has weakened, falling to 100 per US dollar in August. This represents a 15% slide since January, driving inflation that could exceed 12% by 2026. Russia's trade partners are also growing wary. China's imports of Russian oil dropped 5% in July as it diversified, and Russia's reputation as a reliable energy supplier is fractured. Analysts estimate if strikes continue at their current pace, as much as 1/3 of Russia's refining capacity, roughly 2 million barrels per day, could be lost if strikes continue at current pace. Replacing this would cost tens of billions of dollars. The $1.2 billion in missed tax revenue from July alone could signal an annual shortfall exceeding $15 billion. Russia still possesses buffers. Its foreign reserves, estimated at over $600 billion, provide temporary breathing space. Crude exports, though less profitable, also continue. But these measures only buy time. Ukraine too faces challenges. Its drone campaign is expensive, and Russia is adapting its defenses. Yet the current assessment is that Ukraine's economic warfare is working. It demonstrates that a war is not decided only by artillery, but by which side can sustain itself. By striking at Russia's energy backbone, Ukraine has opened a critical front that amplifies the bite of Western sanctions. It has turned Russia's greatest geopolitical weapon, its energy dominance, into its greatest vulnerability. The primary question now is whether Russia's leadership can sustain its war effort as its economic core continues to crumble.